Welcome to Spirits Podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Julia.
And this is episode 189, Hawaiian Night Marchers with Kamuela Kaneshiro.
Amanda, welcome back. How was your vacation?
Oh, thank you. It was really fun. I read about 7 books, went swimming, got one mysterious bite that I hope wasn't a tick and I think was just a spider.
Fingers crossed.
And don't worry, I'm monitoring it and all. It's on one of my tattoos, so I'm just like, I don't know, it's blue. And like, I can't tell you what the color is underneath that.
Who could say?
You know, just life things. But no, it was lovely. Thank you and editor Eric for holding it down while I was gone.
Of course. It's my pleasure as always.
Do you know who also holds it down for us each and every week, Jules?
Is it our new patrons?
Our new patrons, Rachel, Carly, Molly, Chelsea, La Vie Boheme, Anna, and Caitlin, who joined the distinguished ranks of our patrons, such as our supporting producer level patrons, Megan Moon, Keegan, Landon, Mr. Folk, Jen, Hannah, Alicia, Sarah, Nikki, Megan Linger, Deborah, Molly, Skyla, Neil, Jessica, and Phil Fresh.
And I think, Amanda, the kind of people who I would want to go for a swim with and wouldn't want them to get bitten by a mysterious bug are our legend level patrons.
Chelsea, Donald, Eden, Drew, Avonlea, Clara, Francis, Josie, Morgan, BM Yep, Scotty, Audra, Chris, Mark, Sarah, and Jack Marie. Thank you for your ongoing and sustaining support. You, along with our other patrons, make it possible for this to be our jobs, and we couldn't make a living without you.
We couldn't. We really couldn't.
And Julia, our guest Kamu, after we recorded, did a very, very nice gesture of sending us a care package of Hawaiian treats. And there was candy, there were macadamia nuts. They were absolutely amazing. So no matter what you are drinking this week or we drank during this episode, Hawaiian macadamia nuts, they're a great pairing.
Also Hawaiian chocolate, really, really, really good.
Really good. Kamu, you're the bomb. And Jules, remind me, what have you been reading, watching, or listening to over these last few days and weeks?
I've been reading a bunch of books from my childhood lately, the Bloody Jack adventures. I'll recommend some of those in another week. But I have been listening to the new season of Arden. Now, Amanda, I think I've talked about Arden on the show before. We had Christopher Dole, who is one of the writers.
It's Shakespearean. It's gay. It's wonderful.
It's like gay Much Ado About Nothing meets true crime. And the first season is Romeo and Juliet, which I didn't realize that until halfway through the season.
Nope,
I'm like, these names sound really familiar. What's going on with this? It is incredible. The new season is actually going to be doing Hamlet. And if you listen to the episode 2 of season 2, you might hear my voice in a 1-hour special of Measure to Measure. Just saying.
It is absolutely incredible. We love this team. And previous guests, Christopher Dole and Emily Vanderwerf, are co-creators. And listen, anything by them, I'm going to enjoy. So you should totally check it out. Arden is now midway through season 2. You can find them in any podcast app or at ardenpodcast.com.
It's really, really good. Please listen to it. You're going to like it, we promise.
And in addition to Arden, you know that Multitude has you covered in terms of great podcasts to listen to. Julia and I are players in Join the Party, where our current modern story is getting a distinctly superhero turn. And we are only 8 episodes into the new campaign. So if you want to pick up a great, fun, fictional story that makes you feel good about the world while also having intrigue and real issues that we talk about and deal with, Join the Party is for you.
Heck yeah. I've also been loving Meddling Adults. Mike is doing such a great job making people try to sound as smart as kid detectives. And I think that's really impressive because I was definitely not as smart as a kid detective. But he had a great episode with the team from Hey Riddle Riddle recently, and it was absolutely hilarious.
It was so fun. I've also really been enjoying On Potterless as he goes through a Harry Potter musical and sequel, one of which features our own Julia here. And it is absolutely it's a different thing from the books. It's a fan work and talking about kind of the context and the success of a fan adaptation or fan work is something that I have spent a lot of my life thinking about. So seeing it happen on the show is wonderful. And by the way, on Horse, co-creator Eric Silver has moved on to work onto different projects. So the new co-host Adam Mamawala has his first episode out now, and he's absolutely hilarious. We had a happy hour with him with all of the Multitude cast and crew, which is all of us. We're all hosts and and multitudes. And it was extremely cool to meet somebody new and to learn about him and to get a sense of the kinds of stories that he is going to be bringing to the show. So, Horse, you can listen to the first 52 episodes with Eric and Mike, and now with Mike and Adam, 53 plus.
Yeah, I messaged Mike after the first episode with Adam came out, and I told him, I'm like, I really like this one. It's like going to a bar with someone you know really well, and then someone that that person knows really well, but you haven't met yet. So if you like that like energy that Amanda and I have, where it's like, we've been best friends for a really long time, that's the kind of energy that Adam brings to Horse now.
And if you want to listen to a beautiful 10-episode completed fictional world, Next Stop is for you. Created by Eric Silver and worked on by me and Julia and Brandon Krugel, Next Stop is an audio sitcom about your mid to late 20s when everyone is changing around you and you're kind of worried that you might not catch up. It is so fun. It is so reminiscent of sitcoms. The music is great. The sound design is great. The actors are so incredible. And it is just a wonderful kind of way to like escape and to laugh and to live in a heightened reality that, again, is not our own right now. So all of these shows and more are available in your podcast app. Just search for the word multitude or at multitude.productions.
Check it out. Check it out.
So we hope you enjoy this episode with Kamuela Kaneshiro. Check out his podcast, Legends from the Pacific. And without further ado, enjoy episode 189, Hawaiian Night Marchers. We are joined today by Kamuela Kaneshiro, who is an author and podcaster, the host of the fantastic show Legends from the Pacific that every single Spirits listener would love. And we're going to talk about some absolutely wonderfully creepy cool tales from Hawaii. Welcome, Kamu.
Aloha. Thank you for having me on the show. It's great.
We're very excited to have you. So I'm curious what story you're going to be bringing to the table for us and our listeners today.
Yes, I'm going to be talking about the Night Marchers. They are considered Hawaii's most deadliest ghost or supernatural being. Basically, the Night Marchers are the ghosts of the dead ali'i or chiefs from Hawaii's background and history.
This is the first time I've actually heard about the Night Marchers, so yes. I'm very, very excited to learn something new.
Great. Yes, the Night Marchers they're seen on all the islands, and they march on certain nights, it's believed. They go from He'eau, which is a temple or sacred area, to He'eau or sacred area. And they are considered the most deadly because it's believed if you see them and they see you, of course, not from a distance, but close up, then they will actually kill you.
Ooh. Oh, no.
So if you actually are killed in this way, you will join their procession.
Oh, interesting.
Oh my gosh, that's so wonderful. Like a never ending, kind of like self-multiplying sort of procession.
Right. And the history behind Night Marchers is that back in ancient Hawaii, there were kapus, and it was all to basically preserve the ali'i's mana or power, because the Hawaiians believed the ali'i were descended from gods. So because of that, they had certain powers or mana to command their people. So because of that, the kapus were established so the ali'i would preserve their mana. And they could be a number of things, including just by seeing an ali'i that was a lower-ranking member of their tribe, like a commoner. If they saw an ali'i, then they believed that the commoner would be taking the ali'i's mana. And so the only solution for that would be immediate death.
Huh.
So they would actually grab the commoner on the spot quickly, and they would usually kill them very brutally in a way just so that they can receive their mana back to the ali'i.
Oh, okay.
So if you saw an ali'i, that was a way to possibly get their mana. A more common thing is if an ali'i's shadow fell upon a commoner, they believe that the commoner would be getting some of the ali'i's mana.
Is this like transference of mana by sight only, something that comes up in other tales?
There's actually a number of different tales and so forth, but if the shadow part, that was a major thing. So when the procession was approaching, they would end up drumming so that the commoners would hear the procession arriving, and there'd be blowing of conch shells in the distance to announce the arrival of the procession. So it would give the commoners time to flee, stop what they were doing, and head indoors. Or if they weren't around, if they couldn't get indoors, they just bowed on the ground and watched the shadows pass by to ensure that the shadows of the procession did not touch themselves, because if they did, then they would be killed.
Wow.
That's really interesting.
Another of the kapus was, of course, one of the more common ones was men could not eat with women in the same room. So, and that's actually been seen in other Pacific Islander as well as Asian cultures.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned before that the night marchers would actually be going from he'eau to he'eau, and the shadow part was very concerned about their shadows. So the ali'i had their procession, and there were lesser ali'i as well. And it's believed the lesser ali'i and their attendants could interact, where they're the only ones that could interact with the ali'i, so that they did not have to worry about losing so much of the mana. And in fact, there was a belief that mana should be maintained. Going back to what your previous question, they believe that there was what they refer to as the unbroken rainbow. So there was a lot of incest going on for the ali'i, so that they could maintain their power. And I believe to a degree that was seen in certain Egyptian mythologies as well.
Yeah, they specifically. And I feel like most early religions did have just a lot of incest. The Greeks also, it's a lot of marrying of the sisters and the brothers. So it's not super uncommon, as we've talked about on the show before.
Right. And so this brings us to the night. It's speculated that the night marchers march on what is known as Po Kane. Po Kane is the 27th night of the Hawaiian lunar calendar. The Hawaiians followed the lunar calendar, and because of that, the night of Kane was a Hawaiian god, one of the 4 major gods, and he was the god, or akua, of the nature and of water. Po Kane was important because it's believed that the ali'i would use this night to go and tend to the sacred areas and the temples, or he'eaus. Only the ali'i could go inside the he'eaus, and on Po Kane, it's believed that gave them enough light, they could see what they were doing, and it provided the smallest shadow for them, so they didn't have to worry about their shadow touching other people or having an elongated shadow to lose the mana.
Oh, that's super interesting. That's incredible. I really love that.
Yeah, I was thinking the fact that shadows are so important. I wonder why the night marchers are at night if they, have the chance to gain power from others. What do you think the reason is that they march at night instead, with presumably, lighter or no shadow?
I think that the night marchers just go at night because it's just easier. They couldn't always be going out and disrupting the commoners, what they were doing for the villages and for their people as far as fishing and such.
Sure.
Hawaii's also pretty hot. They had cloaks and ceremonial headdresses and made of feathers, and I think that would also be, while it's ceremonial, it's very unclear really about why they would march specifically at night. So
that sounds like reason enough to me. Yeah. I would also choose to march at the coolest part of the day, right, with my full regalia on.
So there are ways to survive the night marchers if you actually encounter them. They usually, like I mentioned, are heard drumming throughout the night. You can hear drumming. It's not the traditional drumming you hear. It's like a thumping sound that gets louder and more frequent. And of course, you hear a conch shell blowing. And if you do hear that, you generally want to head indoors, run away. You are, of course, safe if you've seen them from a distance, like I mentioned before. There's speculation over things like, for example, there's a myth that says that, or belief that says, if you strip off all your clothes and urinate on yourself, then it is seen as, you're seen as unclean. So because of that, they will not want to touch you. Or you can play dead. That's another thing. But the thing that really acts as a barrier is the Hawaiian tea leaves. They are not like the drinking tea. They are like, I believe that their scientific term is cordyline fruticosa. So that type of plant, if you plant those plants around your house, then they will not, they will go around your house. Because they can go through walls, and they've been known to go through houses and such. In fact, it's believed that if your front door lines up with your back door, that is a tunnel that acts as a vortex to attract ghosts and possibly the night marchers.
Oh, I love that detail. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I also love landscaping for spiritual protection.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
You've got other things going on. There's been cases where people have encountered the night marchers walking through their house, and they'd have to plant the tea plants for protection. The tea plants are sacred to Hawaiians because they are believed to be a sacred thing in our ceremonies, because they are attached with the god Lono, as well as Kane are two of the main Hawaiian gods. And because of that attachment, Lono is the god of prosperity, and there's also the goddess Laka. There's confusion over that because a lot of people believe the goddess of the hula is Hi'iaka, but other people consider it Laka. The tea leaves are actually used in Hawaiian ceremonies for blessings, as well as it's believed to bring good luck. So you'll see commonly tea leaf leis that are given to people for good luck.
I love that it's so versatile.
Oh yeah, it's a multi-used item. So
plant them outside your house. You have them for ceremonies. Give them to visitors. Yeah, that sounds great.
It's very common you actually have tea leaves out there, and we do have tea leaves outside the house. So
you're covered.
Yeah. Well, on top of that, the ultimate way to survive the night marchers is, and this brings us back to what we were saying earlier about if you die and join their procession, the ultimate way a lot of people believe to survive night marchers is if your relative is in the procession or an ancestor, because it's believed if you see the night marchers and they're about to kill you, your ancestor in that procession will step forward and say stop and claim you as theirs, and you'll be spared.
Oh, I love some ancestral protection.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Instead of, your family is cursed or this befell you, earlier in your family's legacy, and now it will you as well. That idea that you can be protected is so wonderful.
Yes. And it's believed my family is protected because we're one of the few Hawaiians out there that have a direct lineage to a Hawaiian ali'i. And we are related to the Kauai chief, or Kauai ali'i Chief Ka'iana, who was one of Kamehameha's most trusted advisors and helped him with his campaign.
Hell yeah.
That is incredibly cool.
Oh, also, there's been reports of Asians being spared from the night marchers because their ancestors, who were plantation workers, were part of the night marcher procession, and they saved them.
Wow.
Very cool.
I've seen the night marchers as well and encountered them. And it's common for Hawaiians we're very spiritual people, and we basically say if you're Hawaiian and you have not encountered three unexplained things in your life, then you're just not paying attention. And so there was a Hawaiian master storyteller. His name was Dr. Glenn Grant. He collected a lot of the stories, and he was the expert in Hawaiian mythology. He was from California. I think that it's awesome that he was not a Hawaiian, or what we refer to as a haole. And now I just want to be clear that haole, I was taught that the word haole is not derogatory or negative. It's all in how you use it, and it's how it's the words that come before the term haole, because haole started off as
Sure.
ha, which is breath, and aole, or ole is a short form of aole, which means none. So no breath. And then what most people don't realize is, as whaling industry picked up in Hawaii, Hawaiians needed a way to have money to provide for their family. So because of that,
Of course.
it's common that Hawaiians would end up joining whaling vessels and then going out to sea and then having families. So you had Hawaiians that were not born in Hawaii, and they needed to try and find out a way to distinguish everyone. So at that point in time, it was common for Hawaiians to be called haoles or haules. Hawaiians and local pidgin uses a lot of descriptors. For example, the catch-all phrase for that could mean anything is dakine. And so it's like, oh, pass me the dakine. Oh, you're going to the dakine. So basically speaking, all ethnicities have their own slang word in Hawaii. So it's not just the Caucasians that were singled out with that. Wow, we got off on a totally different tangent. So
No, I love tangents. We love tangents here.
That's the show. Julia, when I am away, like I was last week, I really like to get back in touch with other parts of creativity and just hobbies that I have that I might not make time for in my daily life. And last week, I took a course in something that I completely have no skills in, which is called graphic design. Create a bold, colorful album cover by Temi Coker on Skillshare. And this was such a fun way to think about design and pattern and color and inspiration. And even though I don't have an album to be making a cover for, it was really relaxing and kind of exercise a different part of my brain that I can use in daily life. And the great thing about Skillshare is that it has courses like that. So whether you're, wanting to develop graphic design for your career, or like me, you just want to kind of watch it to relax and to take up a creative hobby, Skillshare has options for you. Their classes are designed for real life and all of the circumstances that come with it. Creative self-discovery and expression can settle your mind, and being creative in general and being spontaneous can help break up the routine of whatever your life looks like now. Their classes are short, the videos are good quality, and you can even connect with other students and instructors in the forums. So go to Skillshare.com/spirits2, where our listeners will get 2 free months of premium membership. That's 2 free months of unlimited access to all of Skillshare's classes at Skillshare.com/spirits2.
Skillshare.com/spirits2. Amanda, it has been so hot in my new apartment lately, and I just don't have enough clothes that are nice and light and breezy. So when Stitch Fix sent me an email reminding me that I had a fix coming up, I immediately sent them a message back, be like, please send me light clothes. I'm so hot all the time. And of course, Stitch Fix delivered, because Stitch Fix is a personal styling company that brings you the world of fashion and style. It's a completely different and fun way to find clothes that you'll love, that's all about you every time. Like, they listen to my suggestions and they really, really deliver. So to get started, you just have to go to stitchfix.com/spirits to set up your profile, and they'll deliver these great looks personalized just for you in the colors that you like, in the styles that you like, and in the budget that you like, which is super important.
I also requested a fix recently, and I got to ask them for something that you cannot filter for when online shopping, which is, I am never going to wear a strapless bra. Do not make me. So please, when you send me tank tops and dresses and jumpsuits, make sure that they have straps so I don't have to weirdly work around them. Like, I need, a wider strap, and all of the stuff that came absolutely worked for me. And that's never something that I could request or filter for online.
That's smart. That's really smart. And it's really, really simple. All you have to do is pay a $20 styling fee for each fix, which is credited towards anything you keep. So if you keep any shirt, any pants, any skirt, any dress, that $20 immediately goes to that shirt or skirt or whatever. You can schedule it at any time. There's no subscription required. Plus, shipping, returns, and exchanges are always easy and free. So Stitch Fix is there to do the hard work for you. They make great style effortless for everyone, including women, kids, men, non-binary folks, whatever you'd like. So to get started today, go to stitchfix.com/spirits and you'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. Again, that's stitchfix.com/spirits for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix.
stitchfix.com/spirits.
Thanks, Stitch Fix.
And speaking of it being so hot outside, Julia, I really have been loving the meal boxes recently because that means I don't have to go to the grocery store, go through the whole process, stand in line outside, and then walk home with heavy groceries. And Every Plate has been a really, really great way to not just get more convenient meals sent home, but also cheaper alternatives to takeout and delivery. Their recipes come together in about 30 minutes, which is definitely faster than that whole grocery store routine that I talked about, or even starting a meal from scratch at home like I would just on my own. And they even offer contactless delivery to your doorstep so that you can do your home cooking on a budget safely.
Yeah, I actually really loved the last box that we got from Every Plate. There was this one dish in there that was like a baked gnocchi with sausage, and it was absolutely incredible. I had been craving like Italian takeout for a really long time from a very specific Italian place. And I just wasn't able to get there because I didn't have my car and Jake was at work. And then so I just put it all together and I made that dish and it satisfied that need so much. It was absolutely delicious.
I did the same thing with their breaded chicken tenders, and I was like, oh, yes, fantastic. I don't have to order takeout and be worried about the environmental impact and the heat and the price and all of that because I had Every Plate. And they're now even offsetting 100% of their carbon emissions, which I think is fantastic. So if you want to try out Every Plate for yourself, you can get 3 weeks of Every Plate meals for only $2.99 per meal, aka cheaper than an iced coffee, by going to everyplate.com and entering the code SPIRITS3.
Yep, that is 3 weeks of Every Plate meals for only $2.99 per meal by going to everyplate.com and entering the code SPIRITS3.
We know you'll enjoy it. Thanks, Every Plate. And now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, so the basically going back to Dr. Grant was a master storyteller, and when I met him, it was interesting because within a few seconds of walking into his store, he was in the process of talking to somebody, and he said, what I'd like to do is form a society to investigate the things in Hawaii. And I immediately walked up to him and said, if you do such a thing, I'll be the first to sign up. And we formed the Hawaii Ghost Hunter Society. And
incredible.
That sounds like a movie.
I've had my own investigations, private investigations growing up, and he was impressed that I had such a knowledge of the paranormal, of not just Hawaiian paranormal, but also world paranormal and mythological knowledge. And when I was a kid, we were driving around Makapu'u Point, and that is on the east coast of Oahu. And there's a ridge with a lighthouse. It's very popular. And we were driving home, and it was possibly 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. Along the ridge, I saw a number of things lined up, just stretching along the entire ridge. And I told Dr. Grant this because I didn't know what it was. Now, Makapu'u Point is a sacred area because Hawaiians believe it's one of the few places that is known as a jumping off point or a leaping point, where if a Hawaiian died, their spirit would go to these places and leap off into the horizon, into the next world. And I thought that's what I was seeing was spirits lined up along the ridge. But Dr. Grant actually told me that I saw a rare version of the Night Marchers.
Whoa.
And what made this group rare was that they were gods and demigods marching. And so that was their procession.
I have goosebumps.
You fully cut to the feeling of this myth. You got incredibly to the heart of it, and you saw the shiny foil blue dragon version.
Yeah, totally. I got the golden ticket, the legendary thing. I don't know. But it's
Yeah, no,
The
it's
shiny
perfect.
Wooloo. Oh, yeah.
it's interesting because it's suspected this procession, the god procession, was on Pokane, which is the 27th night, as we mentioned before. But there's also another theory that states that they could march on Po'akua, and that's the 14th night of the Hawaiian lunar calendar, because Po means night, and Akua, as we mentioned before, is God. So it's essentially the 14th night is known as the Night of Gods, or the God's Night.
And do you know what night you saw them?
No, I was a kid at the time, so...
Ah, I want to know.
One day you'll have to like go back into the archive and be like, why were we driving that day? Were we going to someone's birthday or something like that? I don't know.
Well, there was another time I was in Hilo and on the Big Island, and my mom and I were visiting my sister, and her Hawaiian neighbors had a party that was going on down the street. And we don't mind. It's locals. We're all cool with everything. And the night got progressively louder as the hours went by. And right around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, we heard a conch shell blow. And,
Oh, no.
and when that happened, the whole party just got quiet. So
Oh, my.
I don't blame them.
So it wasn't just my sister, mom, and I. We thought we heard it. We were like, was that a conch shell? And sure enough, we didn't hear the party.
Wow.
Wow, that is wild.
I was going to say, are there other contexts where you'll hear a conch shell blown? Is that a dumb question? Or is it like every time you hear it, it's sort of like, oh my God, let's listen for drums. And if there are, we gotta get down.
Well, it's common that you would hear a conch shell for like a Hawaiian luau, for the tourist and everything.
Sure.
But we were out in the middle of nowhere, and this was 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. And in fact, I asked my mom, I'm like, was that a conch shell? And my mom replied, Kamu, don't be crazy. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Who would be outside blowing a conch shell? And then she realized what she said, and she's like, all right, let's go to sleep. And she turned off the lights and went to sleep. So, but yes, the Hawaii Ghost Hunter Society knew of my background or connection with Chief Kaiana, and they made jokes about that. They said that if we did encounter anything, then the first rule was someone had to grab me, and then we run, because they knew that I was possibly safe, and then I would stay and try to check things out and such. So.
Sure, you were the spiritual shield in this instance.
Right. So
yeah, it's like the opposite of a haunted child in urban legends that we read, where you're the kid that you want around.
Right. But it's interesting. A lot of people point out that friends and people I know actually come to me and they ask for advice for ghosts and such. And one of them pointed out that they know when they're going to see me because unusual things start happening. They consider me like a magnet to things. And I pointed out, well, maybe they are trying to find a way to contact us or them because they know that I'm the person to do that. And they're like, oh, I never thought of that. So there was a time when my sister, when she was in Hilo, she would know that I would be going to visit her or showing up and out of the blue, because she would see an owl flying by. Hawaii has a Hawaiian owl, and every family and individual has what is known as an aumakua, an animal spirit guardian. And while my family has a spirit guardian, as a kid, I always knew that mine was an owl. So my mom said that when she was carrying me, before I was born, she would see owls all over the place. So
that is incredible. And I would love an illustration of your mom just surrounded by owls as she is going about her day.
Oh yeah. It was,
I love that.
We were in, Hawaii Kai is a very developed area, but she would see an owl perched somewhere, an owl flying by or something. And it's like, what are they doing here? So
My family always had Blue Jays. That was my dad would always point out the Blue Jays, being like, "Well, that's your grandpa," and I'd be like, "Oh, cool,
nice.
Oh.
hey, grandpa."
So another thing about the Makapu'u Point is that my dad had an encounter there of seeing a ghost. So my dad's friends were off-roading in Makapu'u Point. All of a sudden, they looked over to the side, to the left of the driver, and they saw a Hawaiian runner running alongside the truck, keeping pace. And all of a sudden, the runner darted to the left into the mountain and disappeared. Now, that is common because back in the day, the Hawaiians did not have a written language, and communications were done through runners that would run through the island to relay messages, and they would use the lava tubes underground as an expressway to get from one side of the island to the other. Now,
Oh, wow.
so there's all these networks from the lava tubes that are shut down and closed by the Board of Water Supply, because there's a lens of fresh water that's under the island, and if anything happens to that lens of fresh water, then Hawaii has no fresh water.
Right.
And so the Board of Water Supply shut down the lava tubes, but there's a whole network of them under all the islands. And one day when we were at Dr. Grant's coffee shop, which was known as The Haunt in Mo'iliili, I encountered some people, and they said that they were on the Pali Highway of Oahu, and they were driving along, and they saw a Hawaiian runner, running alongside their car, and then dart into the mountain and disappear. And so I think that's the same ghost runner, which brings us to the Pali. Now, the Pali on Oahu is a very spiritual place because the Battle of Nu'uanu took place there, and the Battle of Nu'uanu was a way for Kamehameha to gain control of Oahu. And after that, if he claimed Oahu, he was going to form the Hawaiian kingdom. So because of the importance, the Battle of Nu'uanu was Hawaii's deadliest battle to record. There might have been earlier battles, but this one was so bloody that it said the streams ran with blood for days. And Kamehameha ended up pushing his enemies off the cliff because Pali is Hawaiian for cliff. We're not exactly sure how many people died or how many warriors died on the Battle of Nu'uanu, but 100 years after the battle, in the late 1800s, construction workers found around 700 or so human skulls that they believe were the remains from Hawaiians from the Battle of Nu'uanu. Now, them being pushed off the Pali, that was at the end of the battle. There were people that died before then. So
Just imagining the day where you go into work and then you find 700 human skulls. That's probably not a good day for work.
It's
of such historical significance as well.
It's actually quite common in Hawaii. It's whenever there's bodies everywhere from ancient Hawaiian times. So whenever a place is dug up to be developed, they usually find remains.
I know that there's very specific laws here in New York where you have to call in a certain department if you manage to find human remains while you're digging up like a foundation or something for construction. So I imagine that the regulations in Hawaii are probably similar.
Yes, you would call someone or it would already make the news, and usually they would say, oh, you cannot develop here anymore. But they would end up getting a kahuna a kahuna was a Hawaiian priest who was skilled in the ways of ancient Hawaii and the ancient Hawaiian mystic ways. And they would usually get the remains and put them somewhere. We were at the Pali, and the Pali, because of all the deaths, because of the deaths at the Pali from the Battle of Nu'uanu, it's believed there's a lot of paranormal activity there. So Dr. Grant wanted us to do a live investigation for his radio show, because Dr. Grant had a radio show for many years on Kumu AM, and I was a guest fairly frequently. And so we went there to the Pali one night, and we made the location very secret. We did not tell where we were going because we did not want to be interrupted during our investigation. And as Dr. Grant would say, while investigating, most of the time, the most dangerous thing that you can encounter are other humans, because they would interrupt the investigation. So we were there, and I had Dr. Grant on my cell phone on speaker. And we were waiting and just examining the area, and we heard a thump. And we didn't think anything of it. We thought it was something that fell. To be specific, we thought that it really sounded like a coconut falling down onto the ground, onto a bunch of leaves. That's what it sounded like. So we were there and doing our investigation, and Dr. Grant was asking us how things were. And I said, no, there's nothing going on. And one of the ghost hunters said, oh, there's a thump, like something fell. And I'm like, oh yeah, there was that. And Dr. Grant asked us, really? Is there anything else? And we were like, no. And then it happened again. There was a thump.
Oh no.
And we were like, oh, there it is again. And so Dr. Grant was like, what did it sound like? And I'm like, well, it sounded like a coconut falling on leaves. And Dr. Grant said, that's interesting. Looking back on it, I don't think there were any coconuts there. There were no coconut trees at all in that area. So there was another thump. And I'm like, oh, there it is again. Did you hear that, Dr. Grant? And we're like, oh yeah.
Strong wind
we're
out
like,
there.
oh wow, did you hear that? And all of us investigators were there. We're like, where's that coming from? We hear this thumping. And Dr. Grant's like, wait, so let me get this straight. You guys are out there and you're hearing this thing like a dropping or a thumping? And I'm like, yeah, can you hear it? And he's like, no, I can't hear it. I'm like, oh, well, let's try to get closer so you maybe hear it. And then we heard it again. I'm like, there, did you hear that? And he's like, no, Kamu, I want you all to leave. Just leave. Go back to the cars, just leave. And I'm like, no, like we can do this. It sounds close. And he's like, no, just go back. So we ended up going back.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So we ended up going back to the cars and calling off the investigation. And Dr. Grant said, yeah, that was the Night Marchers. And we were like, oh, really? And Dr. Grant was like, yeah, that was the Night Marchers. I'm like, oh, I didn't think drumming sounded like that. And that's why I mentioned earlier, it can sound like something falling from a tree.
Not necessarily drumming.
Right. And Dr. Grant asked, well, you guys encountered it. And I was like, yeah, we did. And he said, well, at least you got the recordings. And I'm like, yeah, we got the recordings. And I looked at everybody and they were like, no. And I'm like, actually, Dr. Grant. And Dr. Grant was like, you guys went on an investigation and you didn't even record anything? We're so excited. We just forgot to turn things on. So
he sounds delightful.
So that was it.
We've all been there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Not like they're specifically investigating what turns out to be the Night Marchers, but definitely have forgotten to record a podcast episode.
We ended up doing a follow-up. Now, the follow-up was interesting. We went back on another night, and it was a lot darker. It felt darker. Shadows seemed longer. And we went up to the area where we heard the thumping, but nothing was there. Now, instead, there was this big tree that was early on in the trail that we went to. And I will say that I am a bit sensitive. I'm not psychic. I can sense when things are around. I have a pretty good sensory. My great grandmother was what people or what Hawaiians consider tutu lady, and a tutu is Hawaiian for grandmother. So a tutu lady is a Hawaiian who understands the Hawaiian arts, but is not on the level of a kahuna. So I'm sensitive. I can sense things. And we went to this tree, and all of us sensed something with this tree. I was part of the formation of the group as far as choosing or as making sure the members were balanced. And I wanted to make sure that there were skeptics. And even the skeptics, at the end of when we stopped having the Hawaii Ghost Hunter Society, when we were disbanded, at the end of the run, even the skeptics had several things that they could not explain. So this tree was there, and we were getting all kinds of readings, unusual things. I brought a video camera, and when we gathered to review the video cameras, when I would press play on the camera would shut off and the tape would eject.
Wow.
That's not what that button
Right.
does.
Not what that does.
And we, to this day, it's like whenever I try to do that, it's I have to turn off the camera, turn it back on, put the tape in, push play, the camera shuts off, and the tape ejects.
Oh,
That's amazing.
Like I mentioned before, the Hawaii Ghost Hunters we stopped investigating because Dr. Grant passed away. And Dr. Grant was a great source of Hawaiiana or Hawaiian knowledge of areas. And we tried to continue without Dr. Grant, but a lot of our time was spent in the archives looking up what was possibly there that we could possibly encounter.
Yeah.
As far as the night marchers are still encountered on all Hawaiian islands. It should be noted that the people that experience the night marchers are not just Hawaiians. I mentioned before there are Asians. Pretty much every ethnicity in Hawaii has encountered the night marchers. That includes people of varying educational backgrounds. So it's not just one type of ethnicity or one type of person regardless of their education. If a commoner violated a kapu, they were sentenced to death. However, they could avoid being sentenced to death by running away and finding refuge in what was known as a city of refuge. And every island or every district had a city of refuge. They were just very difficult to get to. And that's why if somebody violated a kapu, they were quickly put to death. So they were not given the opportunity to flee to a city of refuge. And so they were killed so they could immediately restore the mana of the ali'i. So on the Big Island, there is the City of Refuge National Park. Is a nice place to visit if you're there. And there's also petroglyphs of what people believe were night marchers on the Big Island. If this is true, then this could mean the night marchers predate the Hawaiian kingdom.
Wow.
That's so cool. That is so interesting. Oh, Kamu.
And then there's other things as well, my own encounters, and Well, of course, I was just speaking off the cuff with this last part of like various other things that has happened to myself, my family, and all that other stuff. So
It's wonderful. I love both the historical context and the personal context. You just had like the perfect spirits episode. You crushed it.
It sounds like you're carrying forward Dr. Grant's work in your own way, which is absolutely amazing. And I am a huge fan of your podcast. I know all of our conspirators will be as well.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Of course.
The Dr. Grant's episodes or his show would be on Sunday nights, and they were great stuff to listen to. So
amazing. Well, we'll provide some links to his work, and if there are any archived interviews that we can find, we're happy to put that in the description as well. And Kamu, would you please let everybody know where they can find your show and your other work online?
So yes, sure. I have a podcast, the Legends from the Pacific, and I'm also a writer. I have a compilation books out there that were based on a blog that I wrote, and I have a stack of scripts that I'm in the process of converting to books, so hopefully that'll be out shortly. As a side note, it might be difficult to find any of Dr. Grant's work. It's very poor quality. The only thing that is available for Dr. Grant would be his books, which are still available on Amazon, I believe. So.
All right. Well, we'll make sure to link those as well so people can read his work firsthand.
Julia and Amanda, thank you very much for having me on, and mahalo.
Well, thank you again for joining us. Folks, you can find all those links in the episode description. And remember, everybody,
stay creepy.
Stay cool. Thanks again to our sponsors. At Skillshare.com/spirits2, you'll get 2 free months of Skillshare Premium. At StitchFix.com/spirits, you'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your box. And at EveryPlate.com, use the code SPIRITS3 to get 3 weeks of Every Plate meals for only $2.99 per meal. Spirits was created by Amanda McLaughlin, Julia Shafini, and Eric Schneider, with music by Kevin MacLeod and visual design by Allison Wakeman.
Keep up with all things creepy and cool by following us at Spirits Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr. We also have all of our episode transcripts, guest appearances, and merch on our website, as well as a form to send us your urban legends at spiritspodcast.com.
Join our member community on Patreon, patreon.com/spiritspodcast, for all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff. Just $1 gets you access to audio extras with so much more available too. Recipe cards, director's commentaries, exclusive merch, and real physical gifts.
We are a founding member of Multitude, a collective of independent audio professionals. If you like spirits, you will love the other shows that live on our website at multitude.productions.
And above all else, if you liked what you heard today, please share us with your friends. That is the very best way to help us keep on growing.
Thank you so much for listening. Till next time.